The elevator chimed its arrival at the 52nd floor, and Alexandra Brennan stepped out into the pristine marble lobby of Bennett Industries, with her resignation letter burning a hole in her leather portfolio. She had worked as a communications director for the past 3 years, crafting press releases and managing media relations for one of the largest real estate development companies in North America. The job paid well, the benefits were excellent, and her colleagues respected her work. But none of that mattered anymore, because she had committed the one cardinal sin explicitly forbidden in her employee handbook. She had developed feelings for her boss. Philip Bennett was everything the tabloids said he was. At 32, he had built his father's struggling property management firm into a billion-dollar empire that had reshaped skylines across 3 continents. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that he kept precisely cut and eyes that could assess the value of a building or read a balance sheet with equal precision. He wore custom suits that emphasized his athletic build, and he commanded every room he entered with a quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who he was and what he was capable of achieving. Alexandra had been immune to his presence for the first year. She had seen him as just another wealthy executive who valued profit margins over people. But then she had started attending the weekly strategy meetings, and she had discovered that Philip Bennett was nothing like the cold businessman she had imagined. He remembered the names of the janitors who cleaned the offices at night. He had personally funded college scholarships for the children of employees who had been with the company for more than 5 years. He stayed late not because he was a workaholic, but because he genuinely cared about every project bearing his name. He listened when people spoke, really listened, and he made decisions based on what was right rather than what was simply profitable. The problem was that Alexandra had noticed these qualities, and somewhere between the quarterly reports and the late-night brainstorming sessions, she had fallen completely and hopelessly in love with a man who was absolutely off-limits. The company policy was crystal clear. No romantic relationships between supervisors and subordinates. No exceptions. The rule existed to protect employees from potential harassment and to maintain professional boundaries. Alexandra understood the reasoning, respected it even, but it did not make her feelings any easier to bear. She had spent the entire weekend composing her resignation letter, carefully wording it to avoid any hint of the real reason for her departure. She cited a desire to pursue independent consulting opportunities, thanked the company for the professional growth she had experienced, and offered to stay for 2 weeks to ensure a smooth transition. Walking toward her office, Alexandra passed the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city below. The morning sun cast long shadows across the streets, and she could see the construction sites where Bennett Industries was building affordable housing complexes alongside luxury condominiums. It was one of Philip's initiatives, ensuring that every major development included units for middle-income families. Another reason to admire him. Another reason leaving was the right choice. "Alexandra, do you have a minute?" She turned to find Philip himself standing in the hallway, holding 2 cups of coffee from the cafe on the ground floor. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit with a light blue shirt, no tie, and he looked like he had already been working for hours despite the early time. Her heart performed its familiar acrobatic routine, and she forced herself to maintain her professional composure. "Of course, Mr. Bennett." "Philip," he corrected, as he always did. "We have been working together for 3 years. I think we can skip the formalities." He handed her one of the coffees, and she recognized it immediately as her usual order, a vanilla latte with an extra shot of espresso. The fact that he had memorized her coffee preference should not have meant anything. It was the kind of detail a good manager remembered about his team. But her treacherous heart insisted on reading more into it. "I wanted to discuss the Riverside project with you," Philip said, gesturing toward his office. "The press conference is scheduled for next week, and I want to make sure we are addressing the community concerns properly." Alexandra followed him into the expansive corner office, trying not to think about how this might be one of the last times she would be in this space. His desk was organized but lived in, with architectural models scattered across one side and a silver-framed photograph of his parents on the credenza behind his chair. The room smelled like leather and the faint hint of his cologne, something understated and expensive. "I have been reading the feedback from the town halls," Philip continued, settling into one of the chairs by the window rather than behind his desk. It was a deliberate choice, she knew, his way of keeping their conversations collaborative rather than hierarchical. "There are legitimate concerns about traffic patterns and school capacity. I want our messaging to acknowledge those concerns directly and outline the specific measures we are taking to address them." Alexandra set her portfolio down and pulled out her tablet, pulling up the notes she had compiled over the past week. "I have drafted 3 different versions of the press release, each with a different emphasis. The first focuses on the economic benefits to the neighborhood. The second highlights the environmental sustainability features. The third takes a more personal approach, featuring interviews with future residents and local business owners." Philip leaned forward, reading over her shoulder as she scrolled through the documents. He was close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, close enough to notice the small scar above his left eyebrow that he had gotten, according to office legend, during a college rugby match. "This third one," he said, tapping the screen. "This is exactly what we need. It makes the project human. It reminds people that we are not just constructing buildings, we are creating homes and communities." She nodded, trying to ignore the way his praise sent a flush of warmth through her chest. "I will coordinate with the video team to get the interviews scheduled. We should be able to have everything ready by Friday." "You are incredible at this," Philip said, sitting back in his chair. "I do not think I tell you that often enough. The way you understand not just the messaging but the heart of what we are trying to accomplish, it makes all the difference." Alexandra felt the resignation letter in her portfolio like a weight. This was going to be harder than she had anticipated. "Thank you," she managed. "I believe in the work we do here." "That makes you rare," Philip said, and there was something in his tone, a hint of weariness or perhaps loneliness, that made her look up. Their eyes met, and for a moment, she thought she saw something in his expression that mirrored her own feelings. But then he glanced away, directing his attention back to the cityscape beyond the windows. "I should let you get to work," he said, standing. "But Alexandra, if you ever need anything at all, my door is always open. You are not just an employee to me. You are part of the team that is helping build something meaningful, and I want to make sure you know how much I value that." She left his office with her resignation letter still unsigned in her portfolio, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. Alexandra coordinated with the video production team, scheduled interviews with Riverside project stakeholders, and reviewed the social media strategy for the upcoming announcement. She was good at her job, good at juggling multiple priorities and maintaining relationships with journalists and community leaders. She had built a career she was proud of, and walking away from it because of feelings she could not control felt simultaneously like self-preservation and self-sabotage. By 6 in the evening, most of the office had emptied out. Alexandra was putting the finishing touches on a media brief when she heard footsteps approaching her desk. She looked up to find Philip standing there, his jacket slung over his shoulder and his shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. "You are still here," he observed. "So are you." He smiled, and it transformed his entire face, softening the sharp angles and making him look younger, more approachable. "Taché, I was about to order dinner, Thai food from that place on 7th Street. Want to join me? We could go over the interview questions for the Riverside piece." Every instinct screamed at her to decline, to maintain the professional distance she had been carefully constructing all day. But she heard herself say, "That sounds good." They ordered too much food and spread it across the conference table in Philip's office, reviewing talking points between bites of pad thai and green curry. The conversation drifted from work to more personal topics, as it often did during these late-night sessions. Philip talked about his father, who had started the company with nothing but a single apartment building and a dream. He spoke about the pressure of living up to that legacy while also trying to evolve beyond it. "My father built empires, but he was never home," Philip said, pushing rice around his plate. "I watched my mother eat dinner alone most nights, watched her pretend everything was fine when I knew she was lonely. I promised myself that if I ever had a family, I would not make that same mistake. But here I am, working until 8 o'clock on a Tuesday, ordering takeout in my office." "You are not your father," Alexandra said softly. "You actually care about the people who work for you. You care about the communities where you build. That makes you different, does it?" Philip looked at her, and the vulnerability in his expression made her chest tighten. "Sometimes I wonder if I am just perpetuating the same cycle with better public relations." "You are not," she insisted. "I have seen how you operate. The scholarship fund, the affordable housing initiatives, the way you remember people's names and ask about their families. That is not public relations. That is who you are." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words. Philip set down his fork and leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Can I ask you something, Alexandra?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Why do you stay? You are talented enough to work anywhere, to start your own firm if you wanted." "Why Bennett Industries?" The honest answer lodged in her throat. "Because of you. Because working here means I get to see you every day, even if I can never tell you how I feel. Because leaving would break my heart, but staying is breaking it slowly." "I believe in the mission," she said instead, and it was not entirely a lie. "I think what we do here matters." Philip studied her for a long moment, and she had the unsettling feeling that he could see right through her carefully constructed defenses. But then he nodded, accepting her answer, and the moment passed. They finished their dinner discussing logistics for the press conference, and by the time Alexandra left the office, it was past 9. She rode the elevator down to the parking garage, her resignation letter still unsigned, still waiting. The next morning, Alexandra arrived at the office to find an emergency summons from the legal department. Her stomach dropped as she rode the elevator up, running through every possible scenario. Had someone found out about her feelings? Was she being fired? Disciplined? The head of legal, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Morris, gestured for her to sit down. "We have a situation." The press got hold of some preliminary plans for the Riverside project that were supposed to remain confidential. Plans that show the original proposal before we made the community-requested modifications. Alexandra felt ice run through her veins. How did that happen? "We are still investigating, but the timing is terrible. The press conference is in 5 days, and now we have journalists asking why we are hiding information from the community." "We are not hiding anything," Alexandra said immediately. "Those were preliminary drafts." We revised the plan specifically based on community feedback. That is how responsible development works. I know that, and you know that, but explaining it to the press without looking defensive is going to be challenging. Patricia slid a folder across the desk. Philip wants you to handle the messaging on this personally. He trusts you. Alexandra spent the next 3 days in crisis management mode, coordinating with journalists, drafting statements, and arranging interviews with community leaders who could speak to the collaborative process. It was exhausting work, the kind that required her to be available at all hours, responding to inquiries and putting out fires before they could spread. Philip was by her side through all of it, reviewing every statement, making himself available for interviews, and backing her decisions without hesitation. They worked late into the nights, fueled by coffee and determination, and Alexandra found herself seeing another side of him. The way he remained calm under pressure. The way he never threw anyone under the bus even when it would have been easier to assign blame. The way he looked at her with respect and trust that made her want to be worthy of it. On Thursday night, 48 hours before the press conference, they finally got a break. A respected community activist published an editorial praising Bennett Industries for their transparent development process and willingness to modify plans based on neighborhood input. The editorial specifically mentioned the leaked documents as evidence that the company had genuinely listened to concerns and made substantial changes. Alexandra read the piece on her tablet, relief flooding through her. This changes everything. This is exactly the narrative we needed. Philip, who had been pacing his office while on a phone call with the mayor, ended his conversation and turned to her. "We did it. We did it." The smile that broke across his face was genuine and unreserved. And before Alexandra could process what was happening, Philip had crossed the room and pulled her into a hug. It was brief, professional enough to pass as collegial celebration, but it sent electricity coursing through every nerve in her body. He was solid and warm, and she could feel his heartbeat through the thin fabric of his shirt. "I could not have done this without you," he said, pulling back but keeping his hands on her shoulders. "You are brilliant, Alexandra, absolutely brilliant." She looked up at him, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. There was something there, something that looked remarkably like the feeling she had been trying so hard to hide. But before she could analyze it, before she could say anything that might cross the line she had drawn for herself, Philip stepped back, clearing his throat. "We should celebrate," he said, his voice slightly rough. "Let me take you to dinner. A proper dinner, not takeout in the office." Every reasonable part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea, but she was tired of being reasonable, tired of denying herself even the smallest pleasures. "Okay," she said. They went to a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place that did not take reservations and did not care if you were a billionaire or a student. They sat at a corner table with a red checkered tablecloth and drank wine while waiting for their food. And for the first time since Alexandra had met him, Philip looked truly relaxed. "Tell me something about yourself that is not in your personnel file," he said, spinning his wine glass between his fingers. She thought about it. "I wanted to be a journalist when I was in college. Investigative reporting, uncovering corruption, the whole idealistic crusade. What changed?" "Reality," she said with a small laugh. "I did an internship at a major newspaper and realized that the industry was dying. Print was obsolete, digital was a mess, and nobody wanted to pay for actual journalism anymore. So I pivoted to corporate communications, figuring I could still tell stories that mattered, just from a different angle." "Do you have regrets?" Alexandra considered the question. "Sometimes. But then I work on a project like Riverside, where we are actually making a difference in people's lives, and I think maybe I ended up where I was supposed to be." "I am glad you did," Philip said, and the sincerity in his voice made her heart ache. Their food arrived, and they talked about everything except work. Philip told her about growing up as the only child of workaholic parents, about boarding schools and business degrees, and the overwhelming pressure to succeed. Alexandra shared stories about her large, chaotic family, 3 younger siblings and parents who were still madly in love after 30 years of marriage. "That must have been nice," Philip said, a wistful note in his voice. "Growing up in a house full of people and noise and life." "It had its moments," Alexandra admitted, "but it also meant I never had any privacy, and my little brother used to steal my clothes and return them with mysterious stains." Philip laughed, a genuine sound that made something warm bloom in her chest. "Okay, maybe I did not miss out on everything." They lingered over dessert, neither seeming eager to end the evening. The restaurant gradually emptied around them until they were the last customers, and the waiter was pointedly cleaning tables nearby. "We should go," Philip said reluctantly, "before they kick us out." He insisted on driving her home, and Alexandra did not protest. His car was exactly what she would have expected. A sleek black sedan that probably cost more than her annual salary, but was understated enough not to scream wealth. They drove through the quiet streets, and Alexandra found herself memorizing details. The way his hands looked on the steering wheel, confident and capable. The way the streetlights cast shadows across his profile. The way he hummed along to the jazz playing softly through the speakers. When they pulled up in front of her apartment building, neither of them moved immediately. The air felt charged, full of possibility and danger in equal measure. "Thank you for tonight," Alexandra said finally. "For dinner and for trusting me with the crisis management." "Thank you for being exactly who you are," Philip replied. He turned to look at her, and the expression on his face made her forget how to breathe. "Alexandra, I need to tell you something." Her heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Okay. These past few days, working with you so closely, I have realized something." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I value you immensely as a colleague and as a person, and I think we make a good team." It was not a declaration of love, but it was not nothing either. Alexandra managed a smile that she hoped looked more confident than she felt. "We do make a good team." She climbed out of the car before she could do something foolish, like confess her feelings or kiss him or otherwise completely derail her career. But as she walked toward her building, she heard him call her name. "Alexandra," she turned back. "The press conference tomorrow. After it is over, can we talk? About things that are not work-related." The hope that bloomed in her chest was dangerous and intoxicating. "Yes." The press conference the next day was a triumph. The media coverage was overwhelmingly positive. The community leaders spoke eloquently about the collaborative process, and Philip delivered a speech about responsible development that had several journalists applauding. Alexandra watched from the wings, feeling proud and anxious in equal measure. But as the event was winding down, as Alexandra was gathering her materials and preparing for the conversation Philip had promised, Patricia from legal appeared at her elbow. "We need to talk," Patricia said quietly. "In private." Alexandra's stomach dropped. She followed Patricia to a quiet corner of the convention center, away from the dispersing crowd. "We completed the investigation into the leaked documents," Patricia said without preamble. "It was Marcus Chen in the development department. He was sharing confidential information with a journalist he was dating. Relief that it was not something worse warred with concern about the implications. What happens to him? He is being terminated, effective immediately. But there is more." Patricia's expression was grave. The incident has prompted a full review of our internal policies, particularly around workplace relationships. The board is concerned about potential conflicts of interest and liability issues. I understand, Alexandra said, though she did not see what this had to do with her. The new policy is going to be even stricter than the current one. No romantic or personal relationships between any employees who have a supervisory connection, direct or indirect, and we are going to be actively monitoring for violations. The implication hit Alexandra like a physical blow. She and Philip were not in a relationship, but the feelings were there, undeniable and mutual if she was reading the signs correctly. And now there would be even more scrutiny, even less room for anything to develop. When does this take effect? She managed to ask. It is being implemented immediately. HR is sending out the updated handbook this afternoon. Patricia's expression softened slightly. I am sorry, Alexandra. I know this is not what you wanted to hear. Alexandra made it through the rest of the afternoon on autopilot. She avoided Philip, claimed she had follow-up calls with journalists, and left the office as soon as she could reasonably escape. She sat in her car in the parking garage and finally pulled out the resignation letter she had been carrying all week. It was the only solution. She could not work with Philip every day, feeling the way she did, knowing that nothing could ever come of it. The new policy only reinforced what she had already known. They existed in separate worlds, separated by professional boundaries that could not be crossed. She signed the letter with a hand that shook only slightly, then drove back up to the office. It was after 7, and most people had left for the weekend. She would leave the letter on Philip's desk, send a formal email to HR, and spend the weekend preparing herself for the difficult conversations ahead. The executive floor was empty and quiet, the lights dimmed for the evening. Alexandra walked toward Philip's office, her resignation letter in hand, her heart breaking with every step. She found him standing by the windows, his back to the door, hands in his pockets as he stared out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the deepening dusk. "Philip," she said softly. He turned, and the expression on his face stopped her in her tracks. He looked tired and conflicted, and something else she could not quite name. "I was waiting for you," he said. "You said we could talk after the press conference." Alexandra gripped the resignation letter tighter. "I know. I am sorry I avoided you today. I was dealing with some things." "Patricia told me about the new policy," Philip said, "the stricter regulations on workplace relationships." "It makes sense," Alexandra said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "After what happened with Marcus, the company needs to protect itself." "Does it make sense?" Philip asked, and there was an edge to his voice she had never heard before. "Does it make sense to police people's personal lives? To tell them they cannot have feelings for someone just because of where they happen to work?" Alexandra's heart was pounding. "Philip, I am going to break a rule," he said, cutting her off. He crossed the room until he was standing directly in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I am going to tell you something that I absolutely should not say. Something that violates every professional boundary and probably several clauses in my contract." "You do not have to. I am in love with you, Alexandra." The words hung in the air between them, stark and undeniable. "I have been for months, maybe longer. I lie awake at night thinking about you. I memorize your coffee order and find excuses to work late when I know you will still be here. I watch you command a room full of journalists with intelligence and grace, and I think about how lucky I am to know you. And I am tired of pretending I do not feel this way." Alexandra could not breathe, could not think. "You cannot say that." "The policy—" "I do not care about the policy," Philip said, and there was a fierceness in his voice that sent shivers down her spine. "I care about you, And if that means I have to choose between my company and the woman I love, then that is not really a choice at all. You would walk away from Bennett Industries? Alexandra asked, incredulous. From everything you have built? I would walk away from anything that keeps me from being with you. The resignation letter slipped from Alexandra's fingers and fluttered to the floor. I came here to resign, she whispered. I could not keep working with you, feeling the way I do, knowing nothing could ever happen. Understanding dawned in Philip's eyes. You feel the same way. It was not a question, but she answered anyway. I am completely in love with you. But Philip, I cannot let you destroy your career for me. Your company is your legacy. It is everything your father built and everything you have grown it into. I will not be the reason you lose that. Then we find another way, Philip said. He cupped her face in his hands, and the tenderness of the gesture made tears spring to her eyes. We have spent our entire careers solving impossible problems. We can solve this one too. How? The policy, then I will change the policy. Or we will find a way to restructure your position so we are not in a direct supervisory relationship. Or I will step down as CEO and let someone else run the day-to-day operations while I focus on the foundation work. There are solutions, Alexandra. We just have to be willing to find them. You would really do that? She asked. Reorganize your entire company just to be with me? I would reorganize my entire life to be with you, Philip said simply, because none of it means anything without you in it. And then he was kissing her, and Alexandra was kissing him back, and everything else fell away. It was not a cautious kiss or a professional kiss. It was the kiss of two people who had been denying themselves for far too long, who were tired of following rules that kept them apart. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Philip rested his forehead against hers. Tell me this is real, he said. Tell me I am not imagining this. It is real, Alexandra assured him. She reached up to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw, the small scar above his eyebrow. I am here, and I love you, and we are going to figure this out. They spent the next hour in Philip's office, not kissing, though there was plenty of that too, but actually problem-solving. Philip called his executive team, the ones he trusted most, and explained the situation. By the time they were done brainstorming, they had a plan. Alexandra would transition to a newly created position, VP of Corporate Communications and Community Relations. She would report directly to the board rather than to Philip, eliminating the direct supervisory relationship that was the primary concern of the policy. It was not a demotion but rather an elevation, acknowledging her skills and giving her more autonomy. Are you sure about this? Alexandra asked, reading through the proposed organizational chart. This is a major restructuring. I am sure about you, Philip said. And honestly, this makes sense from a business perspective too. You should have been reporting to the board anyway. Your work extends beyond just the development projects. You are shaping our entire public identity. They took the proposal to the board the following Monday. Alexandra presented the communication strategy she had been developing, the vision for how Bennett Industries could become a model for responsible corporate citizenship. The board members asked tough questions, scrutinized the organizational changes, and ultimately approved the restructuring. Patricia from legal pulled Alexandra aside after the meeting. This is not the outcome I expected, she admitted. But I have to say, watching you two present that proposal the way you work together, it is clear you make each other better. Just be careful, okay? There are still going to be people who question this, who wonder if you earned your promotion or if it was just favoritism. I know, Alexandra said, and I will prove myself every single day if that is what it takes. The news of their relationship spread through the office with predictable speed. There were whispers and speculation. some supportive and some skeptical. Alexandra held her head high and did her job with even more dedication than before, determined to show that her position was based on merit, not romance. Philip was equally conscious of appearances. They maintained professional boundaries at work, no public displays of affection, no special treatment. But after hours, they were inseparable. Philip took her to meet his mother, an elegant woman who lived in a brownstone uptown and who welcomed Alexandra with genuine warmth. "He has never brought anyone home before," Philip's mother confided over tea while Philip was taking a phone call in another room. "I was starting to worry he was going to end up alone like his father, married to his work instead of a person." "He works hard because he cares," Alexandra said. "About the company, about the employees, about making a difference. I know, and I am proud of him for that, but I am more proud that he found you." His mother reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "You make him happy in a way I have not seen since he was a child. Do not let the difficult parts, the scrutiny or the pressure, take that away from you." Alexandra met Philip's family over Thanksgiving. Her parents welcomed him into their chaotic household. With the same enthusiasm, they showed every guest, which meant her mother immediately started interrogating him about his intentions, while her father challenged him to a pre-dinner basketball game in the driveway. Her siblings were merciless in their teasing, but Philip handled it all with grace and humor, fitting into the mayhem as if he had always been part of it. "Your family is amazing," he told her later that night, after they had escaped to her childhood bedroom under the pretense of finding extra blankets. "Loud and overwhelming, but amazing." "They liked you," Alexandra said, tucking herself against his side on her narrow twin bed. "My dad does not play basketball with just anyone. That was his seal of approval. I am honored." Philip pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Although I have to tell you, I am pretty sure your little brother was cheating." "Oh, definitely. That is a family tradition." They lay in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of her family settling in for the night, her mother's footsteps on the stairs, her father's laugh echoing from the living room. "I want this," Philip said quietly. "The noise and the chaos and the family dinners. I want to build this with you." Alexandra's breath caught. "Philip, I am not proposing," he said quickly. "Not yet, anyway. I know we have only been officially together for a few months, but I need you to know that this is not casual for me. You are not casual for me. When I think about my future, you are in every part of it." She turned in his arms so she could look at him properly. "You are in every part of my future, too," she said. "Every single part." The holidays passed in a blur of happiness. They spent Christmas at Philip's mother's house, an intimate dinner that was completely different from Alexandra's family chaos, but no less warm. New Year's Eve found them on the roof of Bennett Industries headquarters, watching fireworks explode over the city. "This year changed everything," Philip said, pulling her close against the winter cold. "Last New Year's Eve, I was alone in my apartment, reviewing financial projections and wondering if I was going to spend my entire life married to spreadsheets. And now I am here with you and everything makes sense." "It does make sense," Alexandra agreed. "Even when it should not, even when every logical reason says this is complicated and difficult, it still makes sense." The fireworks painted the sky in brilliant colors, and Philip kissed her as the clock struck midnight, the city celebrating around them, and Alexandra thought that she had never been happier in her entire life. The spring brought new challenges. A competitor launched a smear campaign against Bennett Industries, dredging up old controversies and attempting to paint the company as just another greedy corporation hiding behind progressive messaging. Alexandra worked tirelessly to counter the narrative, arranging interviews with community partners, showcasing the concrete results of their initiatives, and marshaling data to back up every claim they made. Philip supported her unconditionally, trusting her expertise and her instincts even when board members questioned their approach. When a particularly vicious editorial accused them of nepotism and suggested that Alexandra had only advanced because of her relationship with the CEO, Philip wanted to sue for defamation. Alexandra talked him down. Responding with legal action will only give them more ammunition, she argued. Let our work speak for itself. Let the results speak for themselves. She was right. Within a month, the smear campaign had fizzled out, unable to gain traction against the overwhelming evidence of Bennett Industries' positive impact. An independent audit confirmed that their affordable housing initiatives had provided homes for over 5,000 families, that their scholarship program had sent 200 children to college, and that their environmental practices had reduced their carbon footprint by 40% over 3 years. You were right, Philip told her after the final pieces of positive coverage had run. About all of it. The strategy, the patience, the focus on results over reaction. We were right, Alexandra corrected. None of this would be possible without your vision and your willingness to actually put values over profits. They were in his office, ostensibly reviewing the quarterly communications report, but really just stealing a few moments of privacy in the midst of hectic schedules. Philip pulled her into his arms and she went willingly, resting her head against his chest. "Marry me," he said. Alexandra's head shot up. "What?" Philip was smiling, that rare, unguarded smile that transformed his entire face. "I know I said I would not propose yet, but I cannot wait any more. I love you, Alexandra. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build a life with you, a family with you. I want everything, and I want it with you." "Yes," Alexandra said, not needing to think about it for even a second. "Yes, absolutely yes." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and when they finally broke apart, he pulled a small velvet box from his desk drawer. "I have been carrying this around for weeks," he admitted, opening it to reveal a stunning ring, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds that caught the light and threw rainbow sparkles across the office walls. "I kept looking for the perfect moment, the perfect romantic gesture. But then I realized that this is the perfect moment, right here with you, talking about work and values and everything that matters to both of us." Alexandra's hands were shaking as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, and of course it did, because Philip paid attention to details, because he knew her. "I love you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I love you so much." They announced their engagement to the office the following week. There was applause and champagne and genuine happiness from most quarters, though Alexandra could see a few skeptical faces in the crowd. She held Philip's hand and met those skeptical gazes head-on, silently daring anyone to question her qualifications or her accomplishments. The wedding planning was complicated by their busy schedules and their determination to keep things relatively private, despite Philip's public profile. They wanted something intimate, something that felt true to who they were rather than a social event designed to impress investors or court media coverage. They settled on a ceremony in the botanical gardens, with just family and close friends in attendance. Alexandra wore a simple ivory dress that her mother cried over, and Philip wore a suit that he had bought specifically for the occasion rather than something custom-made. Her father walked her down the aisle, and Philip's mother was crying in the front row, and everything was absolutely perfect. "I never expected this," Philip said during his vows, his voice thick with emotion. "I never expected to find someone who understood me so completely, who challenged me and supported me and made me want to be better than I am. I broke the rules when I fell in love with you, Alexandra, and it was the best decision I have ever made. You did not just break the rules, Alexandra replied, her own voice unsteady. You rewrote them. You showed me that sometimes the right thing to do is the thing everyone tells you is impossible. I love you for that, and for 1,000 other reasons I could spend the rest of my life listing. They honeymooned in Italy. 2 weeks of cobblestone streets and amazing food and sleeping late in sun-drenched rooms. They did not talk about work, did not check emails or take conference calls. They simply existed together, learning each other in new ways, building the foundation of their marriage on stolen kisses and lazy afternoons and conversations that stretched into the night. When they returned home, they found their lives settling into a new rhythm. Alexandra thrived in her role reporting to the board, her initiatives expanding the company's reputation and opening doors for new partnerships. Philip shifted more of the day-to-day operations to his executive team, allowing himself to focus on the visionary work he loved most, the big-picture planning and the community relationships that had always been his passion. They bought a house together, not a mansion but a real home with a backyard and a kitchen that Alexandra immediately claimed as her territory. They hosted dinner parties for friends and colleagues, mixing the professional with the personal in a way that felt natural and right. They adopted a rescue dog named Charlie, who had absolutely no sense of boundaries and who loved them both with equal enthusiasm. A year after their wedding, Alexandra discovered she was pregnant. She told Philip over breakfast on a lazy Sunday morning, simply handing him the positive test while he was reading the newspaper. He stared at it for a long moment, not moving, not speaking. Then he looked up at her, and the joy on his face was breathtaking. "We are having a baby," he asked as if he needed confirmation. "We are having a baby," Alexandra confirmed. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, and she felt him shake with the force of his emotions. "I am going to be a father," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be parents." The pregnancy was challenging. Alexandra struggled with morning sickness that lasted all day, and the exhaustion was overwhelming. But Philip was there for every step, attending every doctor's appointment, rubbing her feet when they swelled, and generally being more attentive than any expectant father in the history of the world. "You are hovering," Alexandra told him one evening when he appeared with her third pillow adjustment of the hour. "I am caring for you," he corrected. "There is a difference. If you wake me up one more time to ask if I need water, I am going to smother you with one of these pillows." Philip laughed and kissed her forehead. Noted. Their daughter was born on a snowy February morning, arriving 2 weeks early and announcing her presence with a healthy set of lungs. They named her Emma Grace Bennett, and she had Philip's dark hair and Alexandra's eyes, and a determination that suggested she was going to be a force to be reckoned with. Philip cried when he held her for the first time, standing by the hospital window with his daughter cradled against his chest, looking at her like she had hung the moon and stars personally. "Hello, Emma," he said softly. "I am your dad. And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how loved you are." Alexandra watched them from her hospital bed, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. This was her family. This man who had been willing to risk everything for love. This tiny person who had not existed a year ago. This life they had built together by being brave enough to break the rules that would have kept them apart. They brought Emma home to a house that Philip had baby-proofed so thoroughly that Alexandra joked they could probably survive a nuclear apocalypse in the nursery. Charlie was fascinated by the new arrival, gently sniffing her tiny hands and stationing himself as her self-appointed guardian. The first few months were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Alexandra took maternity leave, and Philip restructured his schedule to work from home as much as possible. They took turns with late-night feedings, stumbled through diaper changes, and marveled at every small milestone like it was a major achievement. "She smiled at me," Philip announced one morning, looking absurdly proud. "That was probably gas," Alexandra said, "but she was smiling too." It was definitely a smile. She knows her dad. When Alexandra returned to work part-time after 3 months, they hired a nanny and coordinated their schedules so that Emma was never without at least one parent for more than a few hours. It required careful planning and flexibility, but they made it work, both determined that their daughter would never feel like an afterthought in their busy lives. Emma's first birthday party was a joyful chaos. Alexandra's entire family descended on their house, her siblings bringing their own children, her parents bringing enough food to feed a small army. Philip's mother came with a ridiculously large stuffed elephant that Emma immediately loved. Colleagues and friends filled the backyard, and Emma held court from her high chair, smearing cake all over her face and laughing at everything. "This is what I wanted," Philip told Alexandra, watching their daughter destroy her birthday cake with enthusiastic determination. "The noise and the chaos and the family. You gave me this." "We gave each other this," Alexandra corrected. She leaned against him, watching their families mingle, her father teaching Philip's mother some complicated card game while her siblings supervised the pack of children running wild in the yard. "We built this together." 2 years later, they welcomed a son. James Philip Bennett arrived on a warm June evening, quieter than his sister but equally perfect. Emma was fascinated by her baby brother, wanting to help with everything and being surprisingly gentle for a toddler. Life became even more hectic, juggling 2 children and 2 demanding careers. But they navigated it together, supporting each other through the challenges and celebrating the victories. Philip scaled back his public profile even more, focusing his energy on his family and the aspects of the business he truly loved. Alexandra continued to build Bennett Industries' reputation, but she never let work consume her the way it might have in her earlier years. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they returned to the botanical gardens where they had gotten married. Philip's mother agreed to watch both kids for the evening, and they walked hand in hand through the same paths they had taken as newlyweds. "You remember what you said in your vows?" Alexandra asked. "About breaking the rules being the best decision you ever made." "I remember every word," Philip said. "Why?" "Because you were right. Breaking the rules, choosing love over policy, risking everything for what we knew was right, it gave us this incredible life. It gave us Emma and James and this family we have built. And I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." Philip stopped walking and pulled her close. "I would too, every single time." They kissed in the fading sunlight, surrounded by flowers and memories and the life they had built together by being brave enough to love. Years passed, filled with school plays and business triumphs, family vacations and community initiatives. Emma grew into a thoughtful, determined child who announced at age 6 that she wanted to be an architect, so she could design buildings that helped people. James was quieter, more introspective, but his teachers said he had a gift for bringing people together, for finding compromises that made everyone happy. "I wonder where they get that from," Philip said dryly when Alexandra shared the parent-teacher conference feedback. Alexandra just laughed and kissed him. Bennett Industries continued to grow, expanding into new markets and new initiatives. But the core mission never changed: responsible development that prioritized community needs alongside profit margins. Alexandra's communications work was recognized with industry awards, and Philip was invited to speak at conferences around the world about ethical business practices. But the accolades and the achievements, while satisfying, were not what mattered most. What mattered was the family dinners around their dining room table, everyone talking over each other while Charlie begged for scraps. What mattered was Emma's piano recitals and James's soccer games, Philip's mother coming over every Sunday for brunch, Alexandra's parents staying for a week every summer and spoiling their grandchildren shamelessly. What mattered was the life they had built together, the rules they had broken to get there, and the love that had made it all possible. On the night of their 10th anniversary, after the party had ended and the kids were asleep and the house was finally quiet, Philip and Alexandra sat on their back porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. 10 years, Philip said, his fingers intertwined with hers. A decade of breaking rules and making our own. Best decade of my life, Alexandra replied. Mine too. He turned to look at her, and the love in his eyes was as strong as it had been that night in his office when he had first confessed his feelings. Thank you for taking a chance on us. For being brave enough to love me even when it was complicated. Thank you for showing me that sometimes the right thing to do is the thing everyone says is impossible. Alexandra squeezed his hand. Thank you for choosing me every single day. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars multiplied overhead. Two people who had risked everything for love and had one more than they had ever dreamed possible. They had broken the rules that would have kept them apart, and in doing so, they had written new rules, better rules, rules based on love and integrity and the courage to choose what was right over what was easy. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully, surrounded by the security and love their parents had built for them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new adventures, but tonight was perfect exactly as it was. Philip Bennett had been a billionaire who thought he had everything figured out. Alexandra Brennan had been an employee who believed some boundaries could never be crossed. Together, they had proven that the most important rule of all was this: when you find real love, when you find someone who makes you better and braver and more yourself than you have ever been, you fight for it with everything you have. They had fought for their love, and their love had given them a lifetime of happiness in return. And that, they both agreed, was the only rule that truly mattered.